In a world of ladders, two men stand on top of the ladder. In a world of invasions, with two guys and a ladder. In a world of dragon heads, one man, one sword. Three men on top of a mountain, running and hiding in a world. One man will make a difference. Two guys and lightning bolts. In a world of heel punishes and great swords. One man. In a world of fat rolling and jellyfish shields.
Okay, so Shadow of the Erdtree is coming out soon. It's gotta be. Elden Ring comes out 2021, February, which means it's been about 2.5 years with no DLC. And FromSoft has been great at giving us regular updates to the game, patching things, giving us some pretty major updates like the Colosseum, making certain items and spells and weapons behave differently in PvP versus PvE. Those are all great things. But in the past, they've never made people wait this long for DLC. There's never been, I mean, I'm guessing Shadow of the Erdtree is going to come out early next year at some point, and that would mean it was about a 3-year wait. So it's coming out soon. We are almost certainly going to see a trailer and a release date here in the next couple of months. The safe bet is at the Game Awards. I would be shocked if they don't put anything out by that point. Maybe they'll just surprise drop a trailer. I mean, they dropped the announcement at what, like 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday or something like that. But I wanted just to take a minute here and talk about what I want out of the DLC, kind of my wish list for Shadow of the Erdtree. So the first thing, kind of at the top of my wish list here, would be I want Covenants back. Those of you who are old school From Software fans know that dating all the way back to Dark Souls, I'm not sure about Demon Souls, but I know at least as far back as Dark Souls, there were covenants that you could join, and most of these were specifically PvP focused. So you would join one covenant, and that would mean that you could invade people in other covenants under certain conditions. So like if you were a Blade of the Dark Moon in Dark Souls 3, for instance, you could invade people under certain conditions who were in kind of like the opposite covenant of you. But the really cool thing about covenants that I wish they had in Elden Ring is that you could get specific weapons and incantations and spells for ranking up in these covenants. So you would get an item like how in Elden Ring, if you win an invasion, you get a rune arc. And that's just kind of their way of saying like, hey, good job, you won the invasion. It's not really worth anything, but you get something for it. It's kind of a holdover from this other system. In games like Dark Souls 3, you would get covenant-specific items if you were invading and you had your allegiance set to a specific covenant. And if you gave a certain number of these invasion items to that covenant leader, whoever it was, you would get things. You would get spells, incantations, weapon buffs, and that was the only way to get those. They were PvP specific, and you could only get them from winning PvP invasions. And I know how some people feel about these items, right? There's certain stuff in the game that I can only get from doing PvP, but I'm not a PvP player. It feels like I'm being locked out of content. You know, I only want to engage with the PvE. And when they put out Elden Ring, it seemed like they had pretty firmly decided that they were not going to lock out any content from people if they didn't want to do PvP. Which is fine, right? I mean, Elden Ring is their most accessible game that they've ever put out. And I love them for that. So many people fell in love with Elden Ring and From Software games specifically because Elden Ring was so easy to get into compared to some of their earlier stuff. But for the DLC, I actually would like them to go back to covenants or just PvP specific items. I just think it would be fun. You know, if there's a certain weapon buff that you could only get from turning in, 20 or so of these invasion-specific items. We already do have covenants, in a sense, in Elden Ring, because there's two different ways that you can invade. You can use the Bloody Finger that you get from Vare's questline, but you can also use the Recusant's Finger that you can pick up from Volcano Manor. And those two items they're kind of a weird holdover, almost, from the previous games. It's almost like From Software wanted to include this, and then they kind of walked it back as they were going through development. But, I mean, it seems like the structure is already there in the game for them to do something like this. So I would like to see more covenants and more PvP-specific items, especially because it's easier than ever to get involved in PvP with these games. And it's easier than ever to win, I would say. I mean, sometimes you invade a host and they just die and you win. So it would not take that long, I think, to get enough of these invasion-specific items to get this content that's kind of locked behind PvP. Okay, next up, just a couple of small things that I really hope they add. I want to fight a Two Fingers. I think that they've been sort of hinting at this, and I think it would be a really, really fun encounter. Ronnie fights her Two Fingers in the story of the game. You know, we see it dead with this big, bloody slash down the middle of it. I, as the tarnished player character, just want to fight a Two Fingers. I want to see what those things look like when they move. I want to fight one in its prime. I think it would be crazy and fun. And so I want to see that. I want some kind of photo mode. I think it's time that they added photo mode to Elden Ring. I wouldn't even care if they locked it behind New Game Plus. I think that would probably be the best decision, actually. You have to play through the game and beat it. Then afterwards, you get this, essentially a pause button and a photo mode. But I just think it's an addition that they've left out of their games for long enough, and it's such a common thing nowadays. And especially because these Souls games have such a big player base of creators who are making stuff about the game, it would just be a nice benefit to everybody. And then finally, one of my big hopes for Shadow of the Erdtree is that they add some new things to New Game Plus. This was probably one of my biggest disappointments with Elden Ring when I beat it for the first time, was that when you go into New Game Plus, everything is the same. All the enemies, all the bosses, the only thing that's different is, the enemies are scaled up and they give you more runes. In Dark Souls 2, New Game Plus was an entirely new experience. There were new enemies, there were new challenges, there were items that you could only get in New Game Plus, and that made it really exciting to progress through New Game Plus and to find out all these new things. And they did this already with Armored Core 6. There's New Game Plus and then New Game Plus 2, and you have to play through all of those in order to really get the full scope of the story. So hopefully they've seen how good the response was to Armored Core 6 and the New Game Plus cycles there, and they're going to add some kind of New Game Plus content to the game. That is kind of one of my biggest hopes, because it would really kind of extend the lifetime of Elden Ring and keep people interested in playing it, and especially pushing forward into New Game Plus, which would open up more PvP opportunities and things like that. So, that's my wish list. That's what I want.